such a familiar lot of faces. But for you all, this face might not be familiar. Of course, our Amada Saranayaka Thero is today has a duty towards his students because he's taking part with the higher ordination ceremony in Kandy. Therefore, it was unable for him to attend to meet you all today. Therefore, I got the chance. Truly, I feel so privileged to talk to a bunch of people who are very keen on practicing the path. That is why we feel that you all are our extended family. That is why our Nayaka Thero always tell all of us, all of the monks, that you and we all traverse along the same path, which will culminate in attaining the Nibbāna. Because at the end of the day, we all will be facing the same exam paper. Can you remember? Our Guru Thero always tell us, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who we are. We all have to face the same exam paper. And there will be only one question written at that exam paper. Can you remember that question? Yes? Of course. Whether you have attained the noble state of at least Sotapan. If yes, if your answer is yes, you have been saved by the Sambuddha Sasana. Otherwise, at the time of the exam paper, if that is not, then it might be too late. But even at such time, if you have resolved to take up this path, you will get another chance. But better not be late. That is why on a Sunday like this, on a Sunday morning, don't you have any other better things to do at home? Of course, you have decided with all your consciousness that this is the best thing to do. That is why you all have get together and have joined to this noble course that we are about to begin. That is why I said that it is a privilege for me to serve such a noble group of people who consider that this is the best thing that they have to do in their lifetime. So our Nayaka Thero has passed on the blessings to all of you to be successful the journey that you have already started upon. So, with all that blessings from our teachers, let us try and make steps forward in this noble journey. So, it's a pleasant morning. You will have started your day with a very pleasant vibe. Talking about pleasant vibes, what comes to you? Is it a fixed thing? Your pleasant mindset? What do you think? I'm sure there are a lot of challenges that you come across in your life experiences. If you start off the day with a very bad experience, then your mindset becomes very unpleasant. What if the mindset becomes unpleasant and you start the day off with an unpleasant mindset? Then what is likely to happen towards the latter half of the day? The whole day is going to be very unpleasant And you will question to yourself and ask, why? Why is it me? Why does this happen to always me? Have you asked these questions to yourself? It's very uncomfortable and it's very frustrating. How do I know all these things? Because I have experienced that in my lay life. Oh, fortunately, I have given up that life. It's very frustrating to have those memories as well, because it gives me thoughts that how silly I was, because while having the key, I have locked up myself in a huge prison, and I was pointing my finger to the outside world, to whoever that comes in front of me, that they are the responsible person, or they hold the responsibility for my unpleasantness. So when I remember those experiences, it gives me thoughts of, it's a funny feeling. It tells me that how silly I was, because with the lack of the wisdom that I got from the teachings of the Buddha, I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have that wisdom to begin with. Therefore, I didn't know how to respond with those situations. Therefore, as the members of our extended family, I don't like any of you to be at the receiving end to those kinds of experiences. So, how are we going to prevent that from happening? As you all know, you're the learners, or you're the students of this perfect teaching, the core teachings of the Buddhist philosophy, the Lord Buddha's discovery. It is said that Lord Buddhas do come to this world to teach just 3 words and 8 letters. Right? It is very well explained in a stanza. You may have heard this, because our Guru Thero always reminds us about this. Attakara tini pada sambuddhena pakasita. So it starts with Nahi silena vatang hotu uppajjanti tathagata, which means the Supreme Buddha would not come to this world just to give a code of conduct, the good ways to live. That is not the ultimate goal of an advent of a Lord Buddha. He comes to this world to describe 3 words, which consist of 8 letters. So what are those 3 words? I'm sure you know that. What are they? Brilliant. That is none other than anicca, dukkha and anatta. So you are the students. You are the disciples of the Lord Buddha who learns about this greatest discovery. Do you know how long he took to find this out? How many years? Oh no, the question is wrong. How many years? Was it 35 years? Yes? No, how many yawns? That should be the question. Do you know how many yawns he sacrificed himself to discover this? Can you remember the name that we give for that period of time? It's 400,000 incalculable eons. 400,000 incalculable eons. So, what are eons? So, why do I say this? Because you should know not who Lord Buddha is, who the Bodhisattva was. Because without understanding the sacrifice, immense sacrifice that a supreme, not a supreme Buddha, but of the Bodhisattva, the amount of sacrifice that he gives, it isn't possible for us to understand who Lord Buddha is. So therefore, briefly, I will try to explain a little bit of the duration, just the duration of the Bodhisattva, the duration of time that he took to fulfill the perfections. I'm sure you know about the 10 perfections that he fulfilled during the life as a Bodhisattva. So this is just regarding the duration of time. So there's this word called eon. So Lord Buddha gives an explanation to an eon. Actually, there are 3 kinds of eons, to be precise. So in Pali it is referred to as kalpa, right? You have heard that, right? So there are 3 types of them. So the antakalpa, that is the shortest form of eon. So he gives an explanation. On one occasion, one monk comes up to him and asks, "Venerable Sir, Lord Buddha, do you know how long is an eon?" Then the Lord Buddha replies that, "I can't give you a precise number of years to an eon, but I can give you an analogy." And he gives an analogy for that. Can you remember that analogy? Yes. So he takes the example of a huge kind of a container which has the length, height and the depth of how long? It's of a unit that was measured at that time, which measures roughly about 26 kilometers. Can you imagine such a big container? You know, the atmosphere, the lower stratum of the atmosphere only extends up to 7 kilometers. So how high, what is the height of this container? 27 kilometers. So it even exceeds beyond the lower stratum of the atmosphere, 20 kilometers above. So it is that kind of a huge container that we are talking about. So you fill this container with what? What kind of seeds? Coconut? No, with sesame seeds. You fill this container with sesame seeds. Have you seen the sesame seed? It's very small. So you fill this container with sesame seeds and you take 100 kilograms per second. What is the frequency? You take 1 seeds every second, every 100 years. You take 1 seed out every 100 years. So if you take out seeds at that frequency, it comes a time that all the seeds have been taken out. And at that time, Lord Buddha says, a little bit of antakalpa is still remaining. Right? Even by that time, the antakalpa would not have elapsed completely. So that is the analogy that he gives to an eon, to the shortest the shortest form of eon. So the greater form of eon is called Mahakalpa. So 80 of such eons is called a Mahakalpa, or just an eon. Right? So 80, not 8, 80 of such eons is just one Mahakalpa, right? One eon. Then, how many eons has the Bodhisattva sacrificed his lives for the fulfillment of all the perfections? 400,000 incalculable eons. What is this incalculable part? It's actually a number. For example, a dozen. A dozen is a number, right? So, I mean, when you say a dozen of what? It could be anything, right? It could be a dozen of pens, it could be a dozen of books, right? So, dozen is a number. So, what is the number which it conveys? 12 of anything, right? And if you are the students of chemistry, you know another number like that. A mole. Mole is a number. What is the number that it conveys? Number of atoms that is in a mole. So what is that number? It's the Avogadro number, right? 6.022 into 10 to the power 23. So that's a number. So likewise, incalculable is a number. That number is 10 to the power 144. Can you imagine? 10 to the power 144. That means 1 and 144 zeros you have to write. So, of such time into 400,000 of those eons. So that is the total period where the Bodhisattva have fulfilled the perfections. So you tell us that, of course, I also used to tell this when I was lay. When we study for our exams, especially when you study so hard in your for your university exams, right? After maybe 3 years of long 3 years and maybe 5 years of your sacrifice. Now at the end of those 5 years or the 3 years, now you get your qualification. You get that feeling? It's a triumphant feeling, isn't it? Right? After so much of sacrifice, you are able to get that triumphant feeling. What if you couldn't pass the exam? Now you don't let yourself down, right? You do it somehow. So whatever the obstacle that comes up to you, you're ready to go through them. You're ready to go through them and win your destiny, your desired outcome. You're going to take it. At the end of the day, you have this very triumphant feeling. Can you imagine if you were to sacrifice your life this amount of period, and it is a hard-earned result, right? The degree that you were given at the end of your university life, that was a hard-earned thing. You wouldn't let go such a thing easily, right? So, if you know what kind of a hard-earned discovery that Lord Buddha, or the discovery was made by Lord Buddha because of the sacrifice that he himself made during the life of the Bodhisattva. Can you imagine the amount of sacrifice that he has committed? And having understood that, are you ready to let that go? As the disciples of the Lord Buddha, we are talking about his discovery, and we are investigating it, and we are putting that into practice with ease, because we have got the blessings of our teachers, which connects that along the noble lineage right up to the perfect one. Therefore, I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea what a blessing that you have right now. Because the noble lineage which is present today here with us, it connects right up to the perfect one, to the discovery that he himself made 2,500 years ago. What a triumphant moment. And it was the moment when the gods and deities who played their drums and all their winning drums at this triumphant moment, That is why when you hear the first sutta that was orated by the Perfect One, which is what is the first sutta? Yes, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Right? You get kind of a very special feeling when you hear the words of Etam Bhagavata, the Panchavaggiya Bhikkhu, Isipatane Migadaye, Dhammacakkam Pavattita, Appativatya, Samanena va Brahmanena va Devena va Brahmuna va Kenachiva Lokasmi. So when you heard this, I don't know, for me, I always used to get these goosebumps because it gives me a very special feeling, because that was the most triumphant feeling that one could ever get, not in his lifetime, but in the whole time of his entire samsara. We have got that blessing as the disciples of the Lord Buddha. We are talking about this day in and day out because of that blessing of the noble lineage that has come to us, towards us, because of our teachers. So, can you imagine the level of gratitude that you all should feel towards them, towards our noble friends and our teachers? That is why, with all that gratitude, that we learn this, that we practice this, that is why little by little, these concepts internalize into your hearts and minds. But naturally, the ignorant mind, it always repels this truth. You know what I mean, because it is like suicidal for the ignorant mind. Because if you are not conscious, or if you are not meritorious actually, merit is a kind of a force, or it's an energy, right? It's a karmic energy which you entrap. So because of this energy, this truth can be internalized into the mind. But the ignorance and attachment in the mind always try to repel this truth. Therefore, if this was not the first time that we get hold of this Dhamma from the Perfect One, if we were not meritorious in our past lives, just imagine what would we have done in those encounters. Would we have accepted it wholeheartedly? It's very unlikely. It's very unlikely. I think some of you may have got that experience already. For example, let's say that you were meritorious enough to understand the teachings of the Buddha. And now you're following that path, and little by little your attitudes change. So you become ever so compassionate to all the beings surrounding to you. Now your parents or your relatives, your friends might have made notice of this change, and they may ask you, what's wrong with you? You're not the usual friend that I was associating, and you're completely different now. So they may take it positively or negatively. If they take it negatively, then when you are asked for this difference, if you give them the reason as you got hold of this Dhamma, and this Dhamma is what changed you, what would they thought of you? Because they are not meritorious enough. And you try to give the teachings of the Buddha to them, and they don't take it they don't take it positively. They always take it negatively. Why do you think the reason is? Because they are not meritorious enough. Because merit is a force. It's a huge energy which you trap inside. So, energy can be trapped, right? So you see these lights. So this is energy, which is trapped as a form of electrical energy. It has been trapped by the turbines, right? In the powerhouses, right? In the turbines, they rotate because of the kinetic energy of water. Then the energy is being trapped. Likewise, there are turbines in your mind. There are three sorts of turbines. One turbine is desire. The other turbine is aversion. The other one is delusion. So those three turbines, they rotate. How fast do they rotate? Very fast. They rotate very fast. So where do they get energy from? So turbines, actually, they convert energy, right? They do not they make or fabricate energy out of thin air, right? They do get energy from the kinetic energy from the water which is falling. So likewise, where do these three turbines which rotate very fast in your mind get energy from? From the Vipāka itself. As you know, when a mind is formed, it uses the energy of Vipāka. That means the karma that you have, a previous mind has trapped inside. So the energy trapping happens when these turbines rotate. So it is trapped as karma. Kamma vipāka vattanti, vipāko kamma sambhava. Right? This is how the world works. But with one condition. Vipāka would not just bring about karma. There's a condition for that. What is the condition for that? The mind should be ignorant. This will only happen with an ignorant mind. But the other way is not so. Vipāko kamma sambhavo is dependent on ignorance and attachment. But kamma vipāka vattanti is not dependent like that. It is independent of ignorance and attachment. That means even the mind is rid of ignorance and attachment, what will happen? It will keep on getting the flow of Vipāka. Am I talking English? Do you understand? I hope all of you understand, right? Okay. So, because I think you all have heard about these things, how does a mind forms? The mind gets the energy from a Vipāka. So, if I were to give you an analogy of what a Vipāka is, it's something, the energy that is downloaded. Is it possible to download something that you haven't uploaded anything? For example, to a cloud service, right? Just imagine that something is suddenly downloaded from the cloud. Let's say like that. Unexpectedly something downloads from your cloud service. What does it prove at that moment itself? Is it possible to download something that you have never uploaded? No. The fact that you downloaded something itself proves that you have uploaded it in the first place. Doesn't it prove that? Yes, it proves. Likewise, when you get something from the nature, what does it prove? You have given it. You have given this very same thing to the nature. What proves it? The fact that we get it. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this applies to everything that we come across this world. So, what about the person who accused you for no reason, who blamed you for no valid reason? This still is applicable. It is very hard to believe because I think you have heard to the Nayaka Thero's sermons. Now he is talking about ego, even our Guru Thero, right? It's a super interesting topic. I think you have got the hang of it, right? This ego doesn't let us believe the bad side of us, right? It never believes. It means the feeling of self, right? It always believes that I am good. There's no other place good as me, right? This is the feeling that everyone likes to enjoy. Therefore, when we try to confront ourselves by the application of the teachings of the Buddha, it is very difficult. Just because we are suffering from the sense of self. When you practice all this along, the amount of suffering that you get with the sense of self will be relieved little by little. Until such time, it is very difficult to practice. That is why we have to resolve it firmly, right? For example, these might not be applicable to you because you are the ones who try to practice this day in and day out, right? So please don't take these things personally, right? But this might be applicable to you before you got hold of this Dhamma, right? It perfectly rings a bell with me, with my life, because I used to be the same, right? So let me talk about myself for goodness sake. Okay, when the mind is ignorant, it always doesn't like to accept and agree, to acknowledge the goodness in others. Maybe it does at times, but when it tries to appreciate, it always says that, oh, not only them have that good nature, I also have some of it, right? That is why it is very difficult to appreciate someone selflessly. Appreciation is something that people doesn't get the benefit of, because everyone is suffering from self. They don't know that it is a feeling, just a sense of self. They are suffering from self because they have taken it for granted. Therefore, if you take a day-to-day life, for that matter, a newly wedded couple, right? Such a beautiful life that they have with each other. Can you remember? Okay. So, now just imagine they don't have heard about this Dhamma and they don't know that it is just a sense of self or a sense of belonging or it's just a feeling or a perception. They know nothing about this and it is just them and their beautiful life. Right? Just the next day after the wedding. Now, let's say, for example, in the washroom, the husband is used to close the lid of the water closet. You know this argument? This is very common. But the wife says, no, it should be kept open. Now, the happiness has begun. Now there's a conflict between the views. The mind tells that what I hold as the truth is the truth. Nothing else is the truth. Because that is what the people who have a sense in their mind always practice. The same thing is taught by the other person. Why should you leave it open? It should be kept closed. So these are conventions, right? In different societies, they may hold different views. And what's the big deal? But still, it's a huge deal for the mind. Because the mind, not actually the mind, the self or the ego, it is on a continuous fight or a struggle or actually it's a kind of a battle. I have to win, right? This is the truth. So it doesn't let it go. It will fight until the very end. Until that has been proven that, yes, this is the truth. How does it get convinced that it is the truth. Others have to accept it as the truth, as the gospel truth. So this is the nature of the ego. Therefore, when it is confronted that ego is, or the self is just a sense of self, and it is nothing beyond that, do you think that we will wholeheartedly accept that? No, we have not. That is why we get those reactions from the others. Right? You may have had plenty of experiences so far. When you try to give this teachings of this or this Dhamma to someone else who is low on their merit levels, it's like a bank account, right? But you can never check your balance. It's your merit account. So merit is the universal currency. It doesn't apply only to this life. It applies to all the lives that you would have spent during the entire samsara. But unfortunately, you can't check the balance. Therefore, you don't know someone who is low on their budget, on their merit budget, right? You have no idea of their budget, and you just give them a precious gift which worth millions and millions, actually, which is priceless. You try to give them. And do they know the value? Do they have any merits to afford that? No. Therefore, what is likely to happen? Reject. Not only reject. I mean, you can politely reject and with all due respect, I'm not interested. So that is a way of rejecting politely. But what is likely to happen when they are low on their merit budget? They reject with what? It is very likely to insult the teaching. Can you remember? The Lord Buddha himself has said that I consider this Dhamma as my own teacher. So we have insulted the teacher of the Lord Buddha itself. How do we know that? That is why we get all the obstacles. Obstacles when we try to go along this path. So what we give is what we get. So why do we have to point our finger at the outside world when we have to realize that the fault is with me? So can you see, when you point your finger at outside world, there are 3 fingers pointing towards you. These are the desire, aversion and delusion. So these 3 defilements would defile your mindset. It will completely make it a very unpleasant mindset. An unpleasant mindset always attracts negative energy. When the negative energy is attracted, it will be even more unpleasant. And an even more unpleasant mindset would attract even more unpleasant Vipāka. Right? Therefore, it's a vicious cycle. It never ends. Unless you are distracted by someone or something. That is why at the end of the day, you always ask yourself, why does it happen to me? Because you summoned it. Because you asked for it. How do you know that you asked for it? Because you allowed that unpleasant mindset to happen, to continue. You didn't break the cycle. That is why you have summoned it without your knowledge even. You have asked for trouble. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, don't be at the receiving end of this vicious cycle. So, learn the trick to break the cycle. So, I have to give you another analogy. When you wake up in the morning, you go to the washroom and you always check your teeth in front of the mirror. And you observe your teeth are not clean. Then, what should you do? You take out your toothbrush and apply some toothpaste and you start brushing on the mirror. Do you? But where do you see the teeth? You see the teeth on the mirror. Can you see your own teeth? if you were to see your own teeth, then you have to gouge out the eyeball out of your eye socket and put it in your mouth. You can't see your own teeth, but you can see the teeth which appears on the mirror. So, what you saw, the dirt, is on the mirror. So, why don't you brush on the mirror? Okay, let me ask this question. How long should you be brushing on the mirror to get your teeth cleaned? You know that an utter waste of time. But, in fact, you have only seen the dirt which appears on the mirror. Can you see that at least a tiny bit dirt particle which is actually on your teeth? No, it is impossible. But still, you don't brush on the mirror. You get a toothbrush and brush your teeth inside your mouth. Why? Because you know that the actual fault lies within your mouth. Therefore, you brush your teeth out and clean it. And by this process, by brushing on your teeth, do the teeth in your mouth get cleaned? And that's it? What about the teeth that appears on the mirror? That also get cleaned. 2 birds, 1 stone, right? In fact, that is the only way to clean the teeth which appears on the mirror. Is there any other way to clean the teeth which appears on the mirror? No, that's the only way. Because that was a reflection. Have you seen how these little birds, when they confront their own mirror image in front of a mirror, do they correct themselves in front of the mirror? Do they do all those things that I would not like to mention, right? That you might be familiar with? Or these little kittens or these puppies, how do they react to their mirror image? They're challenged. They always try to, they're frightened, or they may be challenged. They may be barking at their own mirror image. So they don't like to correct themselves because they don't know that it is their own reflection. Therefore, when you don't realize that, when you confront of your own reflection, if you cannot realize that it is your own reflection, you will also be challenged. Such moments, we have to realize that it is nothing but our own mirror image. So, such a reflection that you confront with is when you face challenges, which is given by the nature. So, someone tries to challenge you. For example, someone comes up to you and says, let's say that's your boss in your workplace. So they don't treat you nicely. They always blames you and they always find the tiny little mistakes in your work, or not even the mistakes, maybe something that they have heard from someone about something that you never even imagined to do, even in your dreams. So they accuse of you, invalid accusations. So when you have confronted with such things, what should you tell yourself? We have to realize that it is our own reflection. And this is very difficult to do just because we believe that we are so good. And it is the truth, maybe during this lifetime. But could it never have happened along this samsara? Yes, it has happened. How do we know? Because it is proven right in front of our eyes. Because it happens to us. It always finds us. Because that Vipāka belongs to us. Therefore, without seeing the past story, it will be very incomplete to make a judgment just by looking at the current story. You always have to go back and make reference to the past story as well. Thereby you see, this is just the history repeating itself. In the past story, I was the one who talked like this, who gave these kind of accusations, or who neglected, or who blamed or who neglected others, or who blamed ones, who did all bad things and who hurt people's feelings like this. Otherwise, the mind doesn't like to agree with that. The mind will say that, oh, I would never have behaved like this ever in my life. Yes, it is true in this lifetime, but the fact that we don't remember that this has happened before doesn't prove that this never happened. It has happened, as it is being proven by the fact that we get it. So let us recall how this process of jati, you are familiar with. So the defilement process, how is it possible? It always starts with ignorance. So ignorance will give rise to so it is the misinterpretation of the feeling or the perception of self. So the mind feels a perception of fixedness. A perception of fixedness is felt. Then, because of the ignorance, it is being interpreted as something fixed. This is very fine. So try to capture it, try to grasp it with the fine details in it. The perception of fixedness is the final outcome of the defilement process, which we refer to as jati, or ego, or whatever the name that you could use it. But the perception of fixedness, is it fixed? It is not fixed. It is an effect of causes. That means jati is in accordance with the quality of anicca. It is a result of a cause. But what do you think about the self? Is it a result of a cause? Not the feeling of self. The self itself. Is it a result of a cause? Is it something fixed? Self is not a result of a cause, it is fixed. So there is no beginning. It has ever existed before. Then there is no end. It will ever last forever. Right? There's no end, there's no beginning. But there's a continuation. So these are the characteristics of fixed things. So what do you think about the self? Yes, self is something like this. But what do you think about the perception of fixedness? Although it is about a perception of fixedness, itself is not fixed. Okay, I will rephrase this. Some of you look so gloomy. Right? So let's go back to the beginning and learn this. Because this is yes, it might be tricky, but this is the core teaching that we have to internalize very carefully. There are two processes which run in parallel in this mind. Those processes are the aggregation process and the defilement process. So, one process is independent and the other process is dependent on the other process. What is the independent process? Aggregation process is independent because it is not dependent on the defilement process. It is a run-alone process, right? Because it gets the energy from the Vipāka, right? But on the other hand, the defilement process, it is completely dependent on the aggregation process. Only within a mind can ignorance lie. There's a reason for that, right? So let's put a small comma, right? There's a reason why ignorance can only happen within a mind. Actually, that's not a comma. That's totally deviates that session. Okay. So let's keep that aside. So the two process of aggregation process and defilement process. So I think you will know why ignorance can only lie within a mind if you know how a mind is formed. That means if you know what the aggregation process is, you will know why it is possible only for a mind to harbor this ignorance. So let's look at how a mind is formed. So you know that there are 5 aggregates. So mind is the combination of all those 5 aggregates. So in their Pali terms, what are they? Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. So those are the 5 aggregates. So what is Rupa? Rupa is something that is formulated with help of Vipāka and what is referred to as Ahara. Don't worry, I will explain this, right? What is Ahara? Ahara is like it's the condition. Okay, I will explain what is a condition and what is a cause. You may have heard that causes and conditions give rise to the effect. So what is the cause and what is the condition? So I will give you an analogy. When you take a seed and when you try to grow it, what do you need? You need a seed. And what else do you need? So you just have a seed on a piece of metal. Would that start to grow? No, you need some soil which is enriched with some nutrients, some like minerals, water, right? So you need that environment which is appropriate for that growth to happen. So that environment is called the condition. And the seed which starts to grow is the cause. The cause and condition should be matched with each other. That means, for example, you have both the seed and the soil, but they are not matched with appropriately. That means, let's say there's a beautiful field of soil and you put a piece of metal, and on top of the piece of metal you place the seed. Now would that seed grow? No, because they are not matched with each other appropriately. So both the condition and the cause have to be matched. So how is it matched? The seed has to be planted within the soil. So that is the way how it is matched for the seeds to grow. Okay, so now you understand what is the cause, what is the condition, and the way of matching. So when the causes and conditions, when they are matched together, it gives rise to an effect. So likewise, Rupa is an effect. There is a cause for this, there is a condition for this, and there's a way of matching. What is the cause for Rupa? It's the Vipāka energy. Vipāka is the cause. What is the condition? In which environment does the Rupa form? The condition is the Ahara, or most of the time it is the 4 great elements, right? Or let's say the physical form of the world. Then what is the way of matching? There are 2 ways of matching. One way of matching is to give rise to the effect, and the other way of matching is to fall apart. So the way of matching of giving rise to the effect is referred to as Nibbati Lakkana. The way of matching which falls apart of the effect is called as Viparinama Lakkana. So when the causes and conditions are matched to give rise to the effect, it is referred to as Rupa. When causes and conditions are matched to fall apart of the effect, it is referred to as the decay of Rupa. That means Rupa will not be there anymore. Where did the Rupa go? You can't ask that question. That is a meaningless question. Because the effect only lasts until the causes and conditions match together. Right? And the classical example is a flame or fire. Fire is we generally, conventionally we say there are three causes. Actually, only one cause and the other is the condition and the way of matching. It's okay to say that there are three causes, right? The fuel, the combustion temperature, and oxygen. The fuel is the cause, and oxygen is the environment or the condition, and the combustion temperature is the way of matching. So when these three things come together, it gives rise to an effect of flame. So where does the flame come from? Does it come from somewhere? No. That question is invalid. Why do you say that it is wrong or it is an invalid question? Because that question assumes that the flame have existed even before the causes and conditions. If we say that, the flame came from that lighter, that means the flame have existed even before the ignition of the lighter. Then if we dismantle the lighter, then we should find a lot of flames. It doesn't make any sense. So try to understand. Of course, you already have understood the nature of effects. So it doesn't exist. You cannot talk about an existence of an effect. An effect only lasts for a brief moment of time. Actually, it is timeless, right? An effect is timeless. You cannot talk about a duration of time. For example, if I were to ask you how long would an effect last, you can't ask that question because you cannot measure the time. For you to measure the time, there should be at least 2 points of reference, the starting point and the ending point. So between those 2 points, you can measure the time. But how many moments are there for one moment? For one brief moment, are there 2 points, 2 moments? That is a very wrong question to ask. Are there 2 moments for one moment? No, there is just one moment. Therefore, how can you measure the time? Because you should have at least 2 moments of reference. Therefore, one brief moment, you cannot talk about a time. It is timeless. Therefore, an effect is timeless. You cannot talk about an origin, or actually not an origin. You cannot talk about a source, where it has come from, or to a place where it goes to, or you cannot talk about a time which it lasts for. All these are wrong questions about an effect. There's only one valid question that you can ask about an effect. What would that be? What is the cause? The cause, not the source. The cause of the effect. So likewise, what are the causes or the causes, conditions and the matching of Rupa, Vipāka, Ahara, Nibbāna? So now you know that Rupa doesn't come from anywhere. Rupa manifests then and there when these causes, conditions are matched together. I hope I'm not speaking in Greek. Okay, so let's put this into practice. So how do you see things in the objects that you see around the world? So, of course, you have learned these things in your science lessons, right? Light come to your eyes and it hit your retina. And there's a lens which focuses, right? The light rays are being focused on your retina. Then retina is a light-sensitive cell layer. It starts a neural impulse, which you call as an action potential, if you're familiar with neurology, right? So those action potentials or the neural impulse travels through your optic nerve. Then it goes to the brain in a place where you call as occipital cortex. So you have learned this in your science lessons. So no big deal. But where do you get the perception? If I were to ask you, I'm not asking this conventionally, right? Try to think deep. Conventionally, of course, I agree with you all. Do you see through your eyes? There are two of them, right? Do you agree with me if I say that you see, rather than seeing, I would say that you perceive the sight by or through the eyes? I don't mean to say that do you require your eyes to see? Of course you do. Without your eyes you're not going to be able to see. But is that the place where the perception of sight happens? No. How do you know? Is there a way of proving this? Yes, you can do all sorts of mental experiments. Don't try to do this physically, right? Try to do these experiments in your mind. So just imagine there's a person of whom both of their optic nerves are severed off, have been cut off. But the eyeballs are working perfectly. All the blood supply is fine and it is a living eye. Just by the fact that the eyeball is living, does it warrant the sight? Unfortunately not. If the optic nerves have been severed, now they can't see. So, okay, it's not the eye. Then, it must be the brain, right? Where you see, where you perceive the sight. When the neural impulses go to your brain, then that is when you see. Right? What do you think? Some people say still no. How is there a way to prove that the sight doesn't happen even at the level of brain? Of course you can prove it. Maybe you can have a rough guide to it using these examples. Just imagine there's an unconscious patient, right? They're not dead, they're just unconscious. So let's say that an unconscious patient is brought to the hospital and the doctor comes to examine them and they flashes a torch to their eyes to make sure that they are not dead. So they look for the light reflex. It's a reflex contraction of the pupils. I think you have already seen. You may have done that with your little kittens or your dogs or puppies. You have seen if you flash a tiny light onto their eyes, the pupil starts contracting. That is a reflex activity. But there are no light-sensitive cells on the pupil. The light-sensitive cells are on the retina. So the neural impulse goes to the brain and detects that it is too much of intensity of light for the retina to handle. Therefore, it constricts the pupil. How does it constrict? Because there's another neural impulse comes from the brain to the pupil. Therefore, now it has been proven if the light reflex is positive, that means if the reflex activity happens, that means the neural impulse from the retina has to be received at the occipital cortex or the brain. That means brain functions normal. That is how the doctors say that, okay, the brain activity is fine. Now, if the sight happens at the occipital cortex, should this unconscious patient see? Of course they should. Shall we wait until they get back to their consciousness and ask, hey, Mr. So-and-so, can you remember the light of the torch that the doctor flashed to your eye when you were unconscious? What? They would ask at you. They would say that, where am I? Why have you kept me in a hospital? How did I come here? So they wouldn't know actually. They wouldn't have even seen that. So the sight hasn't happened. That means even the brain activity was normal, the sight has not happened. That means something else is required for the sight to happen. And you already know by now that it is what is required? The mental activity, right? So this is where we are all interested about. So the mind and the brain is somewhat connected. We don't know how it is connected, and we don't want to know that as well. We just need to know that it is somewhat connected. So the brain might be emitting some kind of a signal, and which connects that to the mind. And let's call this signal as rupa. Okay, so the condition of rupa involves all the physical activity which happens involving the human body. That means not only the human body, even beyond. That means the light rays that comes from the light source. Then from the object, it is being reflected over to the eyes. So the object should be there, the source of light and the medium and the light rays and the reflection, and then the retina and the neural impulses and the brain. So all that is required for this rupa to happen. So all these physical things are referred to as ahara, or the four great elements. And vipāka energy is also required for this process to happen. And the culmination is the rupa. If it is a light form of energy, we refer to as a rupa. If it is a vibration, that is referred to as a saddha rupa. So likewise, there are five kinds of rupas. Then, now it comes to the interesting part. Now this rupa comes into contact with the root of the mind. Now there's no mind to begin with. Because if there was a mind, then the sight should have happened. We are still on the process of how the mind flows. So it only perceives, or it only comes into contact with the root of the mind. When this contacts with the root of the mind, it creates something referred to as nama. Why are they called as nama? Because they only have the details of the rupa. No forms. Form and name, you may have heard it in that way. Nama and rupa. Rupa is the form, name is the nama. There's a difference between the two. I will try to explain using a silly example, right? So let me draw a dog on this whiteboard, right? Please excuse me for my drawing. Does this look like a dog? Okay. So, to some of you, this might not look like a dog. Someone might say that, oh, such a nice papo you have drawn on the whiteboard. So that is not the idea that I want to convey. So, but they have interpreted this a totally different way, right? So then I'm offended, right? If I have jati, then I'm offended. I will say that, no, this is not a fruit. This is a dog. Then, to convince them, I will write like this. Right? Why do I have to label this? To enforce the idea that I want to convey. By reading this, you get the idea. You get the idea of a dog Okay, please tell me, the idea that you get as dog, does it look like D? Or does it look like O? Or does it look like G? What is it like? The idea of the thing that you get after reading this word, does it have a form of D? Or does it have a form of O? Or does it have a form of G? None of this, right? It is an idea. And that idea doesn't look like any of this. So that is an idea. So that is what is referred to as Nama, or the name. It doesn't have a form. Nama doesn't have any form. That is why I said that the idea of dog doesn't look like D or G. It is an idea. But this form, this is something else. If I didn't write this, no one would identify this as a dog. It's a form. But this form doesn't convey the idea that I want to convey. Therefore, I try to combine it with a detail, right? An idea. So I would rather call this as a detail, because this gives the detail of the form. That is why people put a label underneath the pictures or the illustrations, right? In textbooks, or rather in any book, people like to label underneath the pictures, right? Not always, right? Maybe not on the pictures that you observe in art galleries, right? But even in those pictures, the artist might have a small signature underneath, just to say that this is of this artist. There is also so what do you get when you see that signature? Do you also read it as a brush paint or something like that? Or you get an idea? That is also an idea that it conveys. So the ideas and forms, they are two different things. I hope you get my point. Therefore, the form and the name, they are entirely different with each other. Therefore, they can never be combined. But the interesting part is, they are combined. Actually, not they are combined. There's a constant struggle to combine these two, not entities, these two processes, the form and the name. So the idea of the form is got with detection and identification. So when the rupa touches with the root of the mind, it is detected. So this detection is referred to as Vedana. Then also it is identified. This identification is referred to as Sanya. This Vedana and Sanya, or the detection and identification, are the names or the details of this contact. The contact is detected, then the contact is identified. So this is the detailing process of the contact. So these details are now, there's a struggle to combine these details and the form. This struggle to combine, or this combination, is referred to as Sankhara. Now, can it be combined? I'll give another analogy to explain the combination of Nama and Rupa. Have you observed when you put an oil layer and when you try to combine it with a small amount of water, they separate with each other. They never get mixed. However much you try to mix them, they never get mixed with each other. They get separated, they are totally separated with each other. But if you try to shake it so hard, that will burst it into bubbles, and the oil bubbles might be interspersed with the water bubbles, and they will look as if they got mixed out together, and they would give you an impression they are mixed. It will appear as a foamy appearance. There are a lot of foams. Now, is that a mixture of oil and water? No. How do you prove that? Because when you leave it for a period of time, again it separates with two layers as water and oil. So now you know that even though they appear as mixed, they are not mixed. When you look it under a microscope, you will see that oil bubbles are separated. I mean, not separate. They are on their own, and the water bubbles are on their own. They have never got mixed. But on the outward side, you see them as one thing. There are no two layers now. So likewise, because in the attempt of mixing them name and form together, it creates a perception. It creates a perception as if they got mixed. But can they ever be mixed? They can never be mixed. It will only create a perception as if they got mixed. So this perception is referred to as vijnana, which is the final aggregate of the mind. So this is the process of the mind. Now tell me, I told you before, where can the ignorance lie? Ignorance means deception. Can you deceive this clock? You can be deceived by this clock, that is true. Can you deceive this clock? Can you deceive this beetle leaf? Right? Can you deceive this? You can be deceived by this because you have a mind. Only the mind could be deceived, and it is for a very valid reason. Just because within the process of formation of the mind, it is nothing but just a deception, because at the end of it, it only creates the perception as if the name and form got mixed. But they never get mixed. They never get combined. But it creates the perception as if they got combined. Like, this is a fruit and this is an animal. Is this an animal fruit or fruity animal? Right? But you get the combination effect in your mind, which you perceive. So that is the effect of this process. Then, ladies and gentlemen, this is how a mind is formed. Then we can look into how do we perceive the perception of fixedness, because that is what an effect is. That is an effect of the ignorant or the defilement process. But what do you think about the fixed thing that is created? Is it created? It's never created. It is not an effect of anything. It is a total fallacy. But the perception of fixedness is an effect. Then we have to understand that process. That is the aggregation process. Because of the ignorance, it creates a very pleasantness of a fixed entity. Because after the ignorance, that means an already deceived mind. For the deceived mind, it is not a perception of fixedness. It is a fixed entity, which the mind believes thoroughly. So, for example, can you remember the day that you last enjoyed a nice hot chocolate or a delicious piece of cake? Or the last slice of pizza, right? Did you feel it as, no, it's rising and passing away? Did you feel it that way? I mean, let's be honest, right? That is not how you perceive. You perceive everything as fixed. Is there something wrong with that? Okay, let me ask you this question. Why do you perceive everything as fixed? Is it because of the defilement process, or is it because of the aggregation process? Okay, that might be tricky. So let me rephrase that question. Let's say that, okay, there's an arahant, and you offer them a slice of pizza. Would they perceive the slice of pizza as sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, or as a slice of pizza? Would they ask them, this sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, please get rid of it? Right? Or would they say that, please, this is too much. Please take one slice out of my arm's bowl. They would appreciate that slice being a slice of pizza. They would call it as a slice of pizza, because they feel it that way. Right? Why do they feel it that way? Because slice of pizza, it's a fixed feeling, right? It's a feeling of entity. Is it wrong? Is it wrong to call a slice of pizza as a slice of pizza? No, there's nothing wrong with it. Therefore, it is nothing wrong to call something as something, which is, otherwise you can't talk. You can't, when you practice your path internally, within you, because you can only identify what are the differences or the meanings of the words that you try to convey. Words are like empty vessels. They do not harbor any meaning, but in your views, you reinterpret the meanings of the words. That is why the teachings of the Lord Buddha could never be transferred just through words. Now, do you know why the Lord Buddha have asked not to transfer this knowledge through words? Just because the words don't transfer the meanings. The meanings comes with what then? What do you think? They come with the merits that you have done, that you have committed. The word is a condition, right? It's not the cause. The noble state of a stream entrance is also an effect. For that effect to manifest, there is a cause and there's a condition. The cause lies within you. Condition, of course, comes from the environment. That is what sets the background, which is referred to as parato ghosaka pratya. It's a condition, it's a pratya. Of course, that has to come from the outside, that we get from our teachers, from the association of the noble companions. What has to come within you is a superpower of merit. It's a superpower of merit, I must say. Otherwise, it cannot combat with the internal resistance, because this ignorant mind always resists the truth. No matter how true that is, it always resists. It resists the best. That is why all this long, we could not get hold of this truth. It was always pulled out. Therefore, you have to have an immense power of merit for you to internalize this truth. Therefore, if you get at least a slightest indication that someone is very low on their merit budget, do not ever, out of compassion to them, do not ever force feed the Dhamma. That is the biggest, not mistake, that they would be in a very unfortunate state, because they would have committed an irrecoverable kind of a demerit for many eons. Therefore, out of compassion, let them do big amount of merits, but don't force feed anyone the teachings of the Lord Buddha. Right? It is done out of compassion, not out of, we don't ignore them. Can you remember once when our Lord Buddha was asked, there was a slaughterhouse just by the next door of the Jetamanara. There was a slaughterhouse. There was a man known as Chundasukara who killed pigs. And many a times the monks came out to Lord Buddha and requested, why don't you go to Venerable Sir, why don't you, out of compassion, why don't you go to Chundasukara and teach about this Dhamma? Why don't you show your mercy on him? So what was the response of the Lord Buddha? He said, it is out of compassion that I don't go there. What was the reason? He was very low on his merit budget. Therefore, if I try to force feed this Dhamma, he would have committed even an irrecoverable sin. Therefore, out of compassion it is, I'm not going there. Therefore, try to understand this level of compassion. If you think that someone they are not respond well with the teachings of the Buddha, that means they not at least take it with the biggest reverence or with biggest gratitude. They might not even understand it, but they don't even have the gratitude towards the great teachers. That means they have not reached that level of merit, which included myself as well. It is not that everyone is involved with this. Everyone is included for this. It might be your own mother or a father. But still, if they are low on their merit budget, please help them to reach that state of merit. Thereby, they will little by little understand the teachings of the Buddha. Internalize little by little. As if a small child, a newborn child, they can only digest the mother's breast milk, nothing else. For 6 long months, just breast milk, not even a drop of water. Why was that? Because that was the only kind of food that it could digest without any problem. If you have fed the newborn child with a delicious fried rice, what do you think? Out of compassion, I have to feed my child with the delicious food. Then that will be the first and the last meal that they would enjoy. They cannot digest it. Okay, that's a different matter. So we were talking about the formation of this sense of fixedness. That is the defilement process. Okay. There is a question which I just noticed. So, actually, it asks about the karmic strand. So, if I were to read this out, if all is cause and effect driven and nothing is by chance, could you please explain our role of free will in terms of attaining Nibbana? and kindly explain about the karmic strand. Is it relative to the self? So this is a very common question which comes to every one of us, because we think that we cannot do anything out of our free will. Haven't we done anything at all? It's a very common question. And rather than me answering to this question, you have to derive at your own answer. Otherwise, you will accept, okay, the Swaminatha said yes, or Swaminatha said no, okay, that must be the truth. What's the point of such an answer? You have to derive at your own answer. So, let me help you to derive at your own answer. So let's talk about this freedom of making decisions, right? And about about the karmic strand we already talked about, right? We didn't draw that, but you can imagine the karmic strand and the vipāko kamma sambhava, right? Kamma vipāka vattanti, vipāko kamma sambhava. So we are going to talk about how the karma is formed using the defilement process. Okay, so let me revise the very basic stuff that we have learned using the basic knowledge of the defilement process. So I would not go into details of each of the steps. If we need it, we can go to, but let's say the time is limited, right? So, when we want to do something, we get the urge out of that wanting, right? Now, can you prevent that? Now there's a wanting. While having this wanting, can you just be cool as a cucumber? You have that wanting, yes, I want it, but I'm very cool. Can you be like that? No, this wanting ruins your your calmness, or your resting, of your peace. Your peace is lost. And your focus will be on this wanting. For example, for a student who is facing an exam, this is so vividly, I can remember this experience because it has happened to me, right? Because I was someone who most of the time ended up with studying on my table, right? And the moment I open my book, something happens, or at least the stomach starts rumbling, or I get the urge of having a glass of water, whatever, or to go to the washroom or something, right? Everything else but studying. Let's be honest, haven't you had these kinds of experiences? So whenever you open your book, you get to remember that, oh, there's a delicious piece of cake in the fridge, right? One slice is still there, unless it is being eaten by your brother or sister, right? So you get all sorts of unnecessary thoughts. Just the moment that you try to do it, just imagine your exam is just next day. You're facing for you're studying for the exam which will happen tomorrow. But still, when you get hold of this wanting, you cannot prevent. You cannot prevent your focus being on this wanting, but on the studies that you do. So, this wanting always creates a pressure in your mind. So, this is a cause of this effect. And this effect is being caused by this wanting. Why do I emphasize this? This is not what is believed by this mind. by our own minds. That means ignorant mind. We say, rather than that, we want it. Who wants the piece of cake? We want it. Therefore, I create this pressure. That is how the mind interprets it. So let's see whether that's the truth. When this pressure reaches at a certain level, now you can't hold it back thereafter. Until such time you might be able to say that, okay, I can bear it up. Right? But there comes a moment where you no longer you're no longer able to tolerate this. This pressure will make you rise up from your seat, and it will make you walk towards the fridge, and it will make you open the door. And alas, that final slice is not there. What if that happened? Your mind will cry out of huge pressure. That pressure is able to make you go out of your place. It will make you drive your car. It will make you go to the nearest shop and buy a new piece of cake and have it. So this pressure is so huge. It is being caused by this wanting. But all these steps you did, you tell yourself, I got up from the chair, I walked down the stairs, I went to the fridge, I opened the door, only to find out the final piece of cake is not there. And therefore, I drove to the shop, then I bought a new cake and I came back. So who did? I did. Everything I did. But let us investigate how every step has happened. This pressure has made you, I'm sorry to use this word, it has enslaved you, hasn't it? Unless you are being freed from this wanting, we are all slaves of our own desires. Would you call this freedom? But to an ordinary person, this is the perfect freedom. My car, my petrol, and my life. Isn't that the interpretation that the worldly people says, including ourselves, before we got the hold of this Dhamma? Right? This is the complete opposite of freedom. The total slavery that you can be an entire slave to your master of your wantings. That is the liberty according to the worldly people. That is why they say, my car, my petrol, and my life. Because when I get the pressure, when it is unbearable, I should have my car, and that my car has to have some amount of petrol, therefore I can drive. Otherwise, I can't live peacefully with this pressure. That means your master is the wanting. Unfortunately, that is not the truth. This is just slavery. The freedom is, if you devoid yourself, if you get rid of the mind with all these wantings. If you have got rid of at least one wanting, you would know what I say. You're not dependent on that. Your mind will not be pressurized by whatever the thought that comes to you. They will be just thoughts. Thoughts come and they passes away. So a thought comes to your mind, okay, there's a piece of cake, okay, let that be. And you can continue with your studies. That is the freedom that we talk about. It doesn't mean that you have completely deleted the piece of cake, right? You never get the thought of it. That is not the freedom. Although you get it, you're okay. whether you have it or you don't. Just imagine your mom comes and serves you a piece of cake. Right? Even if you are served a piece of cake, you're okay, you should be okay with that. While having it or while not having it. That is the freedom that the Lord Buddha talks about. Okay, now what happens when the pressure is unbearable? You know, the classical example. A pressurized mind, so another word for this pressure, a technical term, vexation, right? When this pressure or the vexation or stress, frustration, whatever, right? When it is unbearable, something happens. So like in the pressure cooker, when the pressure is unbearable to the cooker, what happens? Yes, right? There's a small nozzle at the top of the lid and it pushes the lid up and vents out the excess pressure. What pushes the lid up? Was there anyone inside the pressure cooker? No, there was no one to begin with. So this is not an action which is done by a person or a person. So that is a wrong question to ask. Who opens the lid? The correct question is, how is it opened? So the lid is opened by the pressure itself. So likewise, in our minds, the pressure itself ignites or it initiates the process of releasing, which we refer to as abhisankara, right? So the releasing process is started. So this release it happens because of the pressure itself. When it is unbearable. Now, here's a tricky point. What if there are several pressures altogether? Right? For example, your uncle or aunt or your grandfather, they are diabetes. They are diagnosed with diabetes. Now their doctors have told them, don't eat excess sugar. Try to reduce sugar as much as possible. Now this might have happened in the Aurudhu season, right? So all the relatives at home, they are tasting all the sweets all around. Now, what is the destiny of your innocent grandfather? Now there's a huge pressure because everyone is tasting it. And they can hear that, would you like to taste this? It's so delicious. It's so sweet. It was made up by myself, or it was made by my relative, or something, or by my daughter. When you hear these things, it ignites a huge amount of pressure. And when this pressure is unbearable, it is about to be relieved. And the other interesting thing is, there's another wanting which is insisted by the doctor. What is that wanting? I should limit my sugar intake. Now this is a battle between two wantings. What one wanting is wanting to experience sugar. Then the other is, I should preserve my life, right? How should I do that? By limiting the sugar intake. Then I want to taste sugar, then I don't want to taste sugar. Those are two opposing wantings to each other, right? So these are known as internal conflicts. You will be able to see the external conflicts that happen between people, right? But when you have an internal conflict within your mind, you can't see that. You will observe that someone is looking out of the window, looking very peacefully, but within their minds, huge two wantings are battling with each other. Maybe deciding whether to give their wealth to their son or the daughter. Those are dilemmas. Have you heard of dilemmas? Those are difficult moments. So people suffer a lot. Those are internal conflicts. Those happen because of two or more opposite wantings. So if I were to draw this schematically, this is the wanting to have the sweet. This is the I want to taste sweet. This is the wanting created by the firm resolution that he took upon his doctor. With his doctor, I will not have sugar. From this point onwards, I will not have sugar. So I want not to take sweet. This is I want to have sweet. This I want not to have sweet. So what is the final outcome? What is the net result? So each of these wantings will give rise to a pressure. The smaller wanting gives rise to a smaller pressure. The bigger wanting gives rise to a bigger pressure. Then, which pressure will be released? So, as you can see, pressure gives rise to the release. But not both pressures can be released at the same time. Why? Because they are opposing to each other. Therefore, only one can be relieved. What is going to be released? The bigger pressure. So, when this pressure is released, what will happen? They will not have sweet. Now tell me, did your grandfather refuse the sweet? I mean, it will appear like that. The grandfather will say, no, I'm not going to have any sweet. That is how it appears to be. But who decided that I shouldn't have the sweet? Actually, did someone decide? No. Now you know how the decision was made. It was made by the highest pressure. The highest pressure got released. Thereby, the decision was made not to consume sugar. There was no person involved in making that decision. You know, the usage of AI, artificial intelligence, these days, I mean, you should know how the decisions are made with the help of AI. Is there a person involved? Don't you make use of AI to make decisions? You get views. What is the current practice? Maybe if you are a doctor, you may get the help of AI to analyze what is the available research details or the research data, information. What is practiced in today's day and age? So likewise, depending on the information, depending on the views, the views are important to make a decision. If you didn't have a view that you have right now, would that give rise to the same decision that you make? No, of course not. Perfect example is you yourself. You got a view from this Dhamma, didn't you? So with all those views, didn't it change your decisions that you made in your life? Of course. So were they your decisions, or were those decisions, were those views inflicted or influenced your decisions? Actually, what happened was, the decisions are dependent on the views that the mind has. Depending on the views, the decisions will be made. Is the person involved? No, there's no involvement of any person. Now, can you think of any decision that you have made? I'll tell you another internal conflict like this. That's going to be a disaster. Right? Because, as I told you, people suffer a lot when they are exposed to those internal conflicts. What if, this is an internal conflict between two wantings. What if there are many wantings? Now that will be a disastrous thing. Can you remember the day that you went to the restaurant and when you ordered the menu card? Isn't that a moment of internal conflicts? Because you want each dish to be tasted. I want this, I want this, and everything. Out of a huge internal conflict, now you come up with one dish. Now who made that decision? I made that decision. Didn't you? You made it, right? Or rather, wasn't that the biggest wanting? So your desires have made the decision for you. Now you tell that I'm a free person. It is you to decide whether you have the freedom, or all the decisions are made by the desires and the aversions and the delusions. So tell yourself whether, am I free? Am I really free? Am I really free to make any decision that I take, that I have taken in the past? What about the decision that I make right now? So likewise, try to think, why do I make that decision? Why did I make that decision in the past? And why do I make this decision right now? And what are the decisions that I'm going to make in the future? So each and every decision that you have made in the past and that you are making in the present and that you will make in the future, if those decisions are being influenced by these wantings, ask yourself, am I free? Am I free? Therefore, if these wantings play and if they haunt within your mind, that means you are not free. Therefore, try to get rid of this wanting. But it is nonetheless, you can't surgically excise these wantings because they are effects. Nothing, no such things. There are fixed entities in the minds. So everything is an effect. So this is not a complete representation of the defilement process. So let us complete the process. So when this pressure is released, it is perceived in a completely different way. How is it perceived? It is perceived as pleasure, right? Or in the deep context, it is perceived as a perception of fixedness. Because that is what it wanted. It was yearning for that kind of a fulfilling experience. A perception of fixedness. That is what happens. But in reality, even though that is what happens, it just gives rise to a perception because of ignorance. It is interpreted as fixed entity. It is interpreted as a fixed entity. Or the self. Is it the self? It is not the self. What is it in real? In In reality, it is just the perception of fixedness. So this interpretation is not the ignorant interpretation. It is the interpretation of wisdom. So, as you can see, this process, there are two ways of interpretations. There are two ways of interpreting. The usual way. Why do I say that it is usual? That is what you have mastered for this long. Right? It is the easiest path to go. Ignorant path. To interpret the perception of fixedness as a fixed entity. When it is interpreted as a fixed entity, now what is formed in the mind as a result of this wrong interpretation? Actually, this is the pleasure, right? This is the pleasure, because pleasure is also experienced as a fixed entity. Do you feel that pleasure is also rising and passing away when you experience it? No, it is perceived as a fixed entity. So, this is the fixed entity. When this is interpreted in this way, what happens as a result of this is the attachment. Right? Okay, let me ask this question from you. So, first let me write that. Or rather we call it, in simple words, liking. Or attachment. Okay, this attachment or this liking is different to the attachment that what we conventionally refer to. Attachment, this is a noun, right? But there's a verb also. You can attach to something. Now tell me, is attachment, this is not an English lesson, okay? Is attachment a noun or a verb? I know that sounds so silly. But that's not the idea that I want to convey. Can you attach? I mean, if you can attach, that means it is an activity that you do or a person do. Is attachment something like that, or attachment takes place as a result of a cause? What do you think about attachment? Can you attach to something, or attachment happens? It happens. When, this fixed entity is it is synonymous with on a lower level, that means on a superficial level, you experience this as pleasure, right? When you experience pleasure, as a result of pleasure, attachment takes place. Now, to prove this fact, you can ask questions from your minds. Have you attached? Why do you ask these questions? Because mind has thoroughly believed that I attach to things. That means I like things. So when you want to taste a piece of cake, why do you want a piece of cake? Because I like it. Who like it? I like it. So at that time, ask yourself, that means ask your mind. So this is a conversation between you and your mind. Someone of you might ask, so how can I talk with myself? Yes, you can talk with yourself. That is called the reflection. That is what we all do. That's a form of meditation. Right? So by you, I mean the part of wisdom that is there. By the mind, I mean the part of ignorance. So this is the conversation between wisdom and ignorance. Okay? So now the wisdom part of the mind asks from the ignorance. If you like something, that means you are the authority, that which decides what to like and what not to like. Then the mind says, yes, I am the authority. Then you have to again ask from the mind, okay, then you should be able to not like something as well. Then the mind says, yes, since I am the authority, I don't like everything. There are things that I don't like. Okay, then ask from the mind, okay, tell me one thing that you have not liked while you feel the pleasure, or while you feel something as fixed. The fixedness is a little bit tricky, because the things that you don't like also, you like the fixedness of it. Right? That is why these are levels that you have to, dig up your mind into. So in these, pleasure is on the superficial surface. So when you have analyzed what pleasure is, it will little by little expose these fixed entities. It is very easy with pleasure, I must say. So when you experience pleasure, while experiencing pleasure, so you ask from the mind, is there any possibility for you to prevent liking? That is the first question that you should ask from the mind. Then the mind thinks. Loading, right? So the mind thinks and asks that it goes around all the memories that you have within your lifetime. Haven't I not liked anything while having the feeling of pleasure? Let the mind think in that way. So this is called experimentation. This kind of experimentation you have to do. Otherwise, the Dhamma, the teachings will not sink into the root of the mind. That is why all our teachers say that don't take this at a superficial word level, right? Don't have beliefs on the words. Try to internalize by putting into practice. So this is so that I'm forcing you to do. So put this into practice. So ask your mind whether this is the truth or not. So haven't I liked anything while experiencing pleasure? If you derive at the answer by yourself without any help from external, without any external help, then you can be convinced. Otherwise, the conviction cannot be achieved. So try to be convinced by your experience itself. So go through all the experiences and try to think that, haven't I prevented liking? Haven't I stopped liking something while feeling the pleasure? Then you will come to know that it is needless for me to say the answer, right? You have to come into the conclusion. Then another question that you can ask from the mind is, okay, if you are the authority to decide whether to like something or not, have you liked anything that gives you no pleasure? Now again, mind start to think, okay, something doesn't give me pleasure. Would I keep on liking onto that? So there are plenty of examples with you. For example, can you remember maybe 5 years ago, the birthday gift that you got? maybe even before. So you got something to your birthday, maybe a golden necklace, which is very valuable, right? So that was so precious to you because it gave you so much of pleasure. And it gave you pleasure. So if it gives you pleasure, you should be able to wear it forever. Right? To how many weddings did you wear it? Okay, let's keep a golden necklace aside. Let's say all those... please don't take this personally, okay? I'm just helping you to apply these teachings into your day-to-day life. Think about your life. So go to, now in your imaginary sense, now go to your home and open the wardrobe and see how many clothes are there or how many pair of shoes are there. But at the verge of a wedding, you tell yourself, I don't have anything to wear. Your spouse might ask, you have to check your eyes first. There are plenty of clothes there, and you say that there's nothing to wear. You have to understand what this mind plays on you. Those are a lot of tricks. So, if you buy one frock or a cloth or a dress or a party dress, if you see someone else is also wearing the same, exact same cloth, what happens to you? It's a disaster, right? You will try to flee away. Not that because you are afraid of that person, but it's a huge challenge to your identity. Because you identified yourself with that fixedness. Now that is not unique to you. Now it is a huge challenge. Right? Because you cannot identify yourself with that arrangement. That is why it creates a huge pressure, and it makes you will try to hide yourself, or you will try to flee away. Just observe what the mind does to you. Actually, this pressure didn't come from the frock or the other person or something else. What was the cause of that pressure? It was the wanting, right? Now, what was the cause of the wanting? What do you think the cause is? It is none other than liking. So this connects this vicious cycle. The liking or the attachment is the cause for wanting. You wanted to identify yourself with a beautiful dress. But the same beautiful dress is being worn by someone else. Then it is not unique to you. You wanted to be unique. You wanted to be identified as a unique entity. Actually, what you wanted is not that dress. You wanted to identify yourself as a unique entity. Now, what happened to that uniqueness? It is being challenged entirely by the presence of the exact same item of cloth. Then, if you look at why do I want that? Why do I want this uniqueness? Because you like it. It's not you like it. Liking has happened. Why? Because you have interpreted something as a fixed entity, something which is unique. They are synonymous, by the way. Fixed entity and uniqueness, they are synonymous. Right? Is it actually fixed? No. This is what we have to get rid of. It is the interpretation of ignorance. Nothing is fixed. But fixedness, is it not perceived? Of course it is perceived. So the perceived fixedness, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a result of a cause. What is the cause of this perception of fixedness? That is because the pressure is released. That is the cause. So when there's pressure comes from the wanting, of the previous wanting. Right? When there's pressure for the uniqueness, when that is released, that release of pressure is interpreted. That release of pressure creates the perception of fixedness. That is beyond your control. That happens as a result of a cause. But when this perception happens, if the mind is not wise, it is no longer being interpreted as a perception of fixedness. It will be interpreted as fixed entity. That is what creates this liking. So the point to reflect is, in each of these steps, that you have to ask from your mind whether how this is created or whether who creates this. The mind will say that I create it all the time. That is under my control. I am the authority to decide everything. Right? So who chose that piece of cloth? When you went shopping? So who went shopping? So now you have your best friend's wedding. And you say to your husband or to your mother or father that, I have to go to my best friend's wedding, so I have to wear a nice frock, or I have to wear some nice attire. Now you take permission to buy a new item of cloth and you go shopping. Now you are at the shop. Now there's a thorough investigation of all their items, needless to say, right? Now, who decides what to buy? It's needless to ask how long that you take to make your choice, right? A lot of internal conflicts, right? How many internal conflicts? Because you need everything. Out of those millions and millions of internal conflicts, you come up with one choice. Sometimes 2 frocks held in 2 hands, but to be chosen, right? You're at a huge dilemma. In each of these steps, you have to understand that, aren't you suffering? Or are you enjoying? But on a superficial level, if you ask from someone, that is why I am again, repeatedly I'm telling you, these might not apply to you all, because you are the listeners of the Dhamma. But if you observe these behaviors in your friends, but they might not tell you that I'm suffering, or look at how much suffering that I undergo. I have to choose whether to choose this frock or that frock. Right? They might not tell you that they are suffering. I enjoy shopping. Shopping is my favorite thing. Haven't you heard these things? Haven't you told that same thing for yourself before you got hold of this Dhamma? That is why an ignorant mind is such a disaster. It will completely waste your entire life. There is nothing wrong with you. It's our common enemy. What is our common enemy? It's nothing but this ignorance. In just yesterday's sermon, our Guru Thero says a beautiful idea. I will share that with you all. if you can promise me that you don't waste your life, it doesn't matter the amount of money that you earn. And it doesn't matter whichever the clothes that you wear. It doesn't matter which car that you drive. It doesn't matter what is the social status that you maintain. Unless it wastes your time. That means there's no time, there's no such thing as time, but it is your life. It's your precious life as a human being. In an era of a live and thriving Sambuddha Sasana, this is the important thing. Therefore, our Guru Thero asks from all the audience, ensure your life is not wasted. If you can promise me that your life is not wasted to earn money, do whatever the thing that you want. But you cannot maintain that unless you have that enough amount of money. Actually, money gives you no satisfaction. What gives you satisfaction is getting rid of this wanting. And how much of money would you need to get rid of this? Or how much of this would get rid of this? This is what you require to get rid of the wanting. This is the tool to get rid of this. Actually, this pathway will make you out of this vicious cycle. This is like a never-ending vicious cycle. Right? It never ends. It's a circular pathway. But if you interpret, if you let your mind to be wise, little by little, it'll pull you away from this vicious cycle. Therefore, it is very important that you keep track of your all actions. That is why our teachers have asked us to reflect every possible minute. It is mentioned in Dhamma Sutta to recall and reflect on every step that you make in your life. Why did I do that? Why did I talk in that way? Was it only for that reason? Why did I flee away from that party? Was it because I was busy? Or I was afraid of that person? Or I wanted to highlight myself as a unique identity of that clothes? Be vigilant, always. Otherwise, this false sense of fixedness, actually sense of fixedness as a sense or a perception, that is true. But if you interpret this as a fixed entity, that is out of ignorance. And it creates a lot of false excuses. Right? If you're not vigilant, you will be justifying yourself. Oh, I didn't have enough time. That is why I got from the party early. Right? I was busy with that. Oh, my mother was ill at home. I'm so sorry. I have to leave early from your party or from the wedding. So all sorts of excuses would come to your mind. And you will justify yourself unless you are vigilant enough. Reflect. You don't have to share all these experiences with your friends, but if you have a teacher, of course, it is always better to share with them. Because how much you become transparent to your teacher, it will open you the pathway towards Nibbana. That is why it is mentioned as the first step in Dhamma Sutta. Vevanniyam hi ajjupagatoti pabbajitena abhinnang pacchavekkittabba. We believe that you also want to do the Nibbana as we do. That is why we share these things. But this might not be easy for you all. Because How frequently do you get the association of the noble friends? Okay, once a week. So there are 168 hours for a week. So you get the exposure, maybe 5 hours at max. So 5 out of 168. So what is the proportion? That is why you have to reflect by yourself. The Dhamma that is instilled in your mind will be the guiding light for you. When no noble companion is around you, you have to guide yourself. There will be no one else around you. That is why we always ask you to instill this, to apply this. The core knowledge has to be applied in your minds. Then only it will be instilled to your roots of the minds. Then when you are alone at your house, when the true self lets out, when your desires let out, you will be protected. If only you have got the blessing of the Dhamma. The Dhamma which is instilled in your mind will help you or will protect you when the desires come into play. Otherwise, there will be no noble companion around you. But for us, we are very fortunate. We are ever so fortunate because of you. Because you are the people who have constructed the entire monastery. That is why our Guru Thero always reminds about all of you. When a new building is being opened or some renovation is done, he always reminds all of you, because with or without your knowledge, you all have contributed to everything which happens in our monastery. That is why you have a right to know everything, each and every detail that happens. All the meritorious activity is upon your shoulders. You have at least tiny contribution. You have at least said sadhu sadhu. You have at least extended your well wishes. That is why with each and every transfer of merits, we remind each and every one of you. Just because you are our extended family. Therefore, try to associate the nobility or the nobleness of this Dhamma within your mind. It won't happen unless you apply it day in and day out. You don't have to express it to the outside world. No one have to know that you are a practitioner of this noble truth. Okay, do you want to show that you practice the Dhamma, or do you want to practice the Dhamma? The best way is not to express anything that you practice. Practice is it's a very private matter. It's a very private matter. You should only reveal your experience in front of your teachers. Because if you have many teachers, then you will be lost. It's your own power of merit which would guide you to your teacher. Because how do we know that this is my teacher or that is my teacher? You don't have any knowledge to identify your teacher. Your power of merit will guide you towards the teacher. That is why our Guru Thero tells us, may through the power of these merits, may I be guided towards the noble friends, towards my teacher, towards the Dhamma. So, if it is not in this monastery, so let it be anywhere, but let me find the teacher. You will know when you have encountered with the teacher, because you are ready to do whatever that the teacher asks for you to do. It may be very hard, but you are ready to do without any hesitation. That is how you know when you have found the teacher. It might sound so kind of obligatory, but this will happen to you. Never even in my imaginations, I would have dreamt to say these kinds of words, because I was so analytical and I was so scientific. Still I am, but for the things told by my teachers, I don't resist. That is how I know that I am meritorious enough. If I ever come and question my teachers, then I know that my balance of my merit account is so low, even I might be on overdraft. Not only you, ladies and gentlemen, even our lives are dependent on the merits that we do. So our monastery is like another country, which is located in this small country, right? Why do I say like that? Because it has the most expensive visa. You know what I mean, right? It is so expensive because it consumes a lot of merits to be in the vicinity of all the noble friends that I am with. Therefore, if we are not careful, we will be deported. So now you know why I consider this as a privilege to come to you all and give this. Why this is a privilege? Because I can earn more money to be in my country. Because nowhere else, if I do this sermon, they wouldn't understand. They would not have the value of these teachings. Since you all are there, you all are ready to change your attitudes and change your life and apply these things into your life. Since you have known the value of this, it is very meritorious to share this Dhamma with you all. That is why it is so privileged. It is a huge privilege for us. And it is a huge privilege for you as well. And it is a huge privilege for us as well. That is what keeps the combination at an equilibrium. So, in our monastery, fortunately or unfortunately, no one can see the power of merit which is emitted from our monastery. But if it was able to see, it will appear as a super bright spot in the map. I'm sure at this time of the day, on a very of people like you who are very busy on your schedule, on a Sunday morning, it's the only time that you have to spend your day-to-day activities. So all the things that was left to do throughout the week, this is the only time that you have. And this is the precious most time for you. And you have dedicated that time slot for the even more precious thing to do. That is the sacrifice that I see in every one of you. So if you're ready to do that sacrifice, I'm sure you can do even more. That is why we share these things. Otherwise, it is worthless. Because it is meritorious for me, but it is always remains a question that has to be asked from you. But I'm sure that these are very important experiences and teachings for you, which will make you your way forward towards the utmost bliss of Nibbāna. So, today, if we were to summarize what we talked about how we should maintain our pleasant environment in the mind. So if not, it will escalate into a chain reaction of unpleasant events, and thereby it will ruin your day and the entire pleasant mindset is ruined. Therefore, trick is to understand that whatever that we face is our own reflection. This is said as ability to see yourself through the actions of the others. Whether you liked it or not, you will always be in front of the mirror. Whatever you see is whatever you have given. That is the first thing that we discussed. Then we talked about the aggregation process of the mind, the natural process of the mind. We talked about the 5 aggregates, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, and what is the name and form, and what is the process of combination, and what is the result of that combination. And that creates the room for deception, because name and form never gets combined, but in the attempt of combining, it creates a perception as if they got combined. That is the nature of the mind. That is why Vijnana is always compared to a magician. Then that is the aggregation process. Then we came to discuss about what process? Defilement process. So it always starts with ignorance. Because of ignorance, the perception of fixedness is interpreted as a fixed entity. Because of that wrong interpretation, it gives rise to the attachment or the liking. Then with that, it creates the wanting and then pressure. With the release of this pressure, again, it is interpreted in the wrong way because of this ignorance that completes the vicious cycle of defilement process. But with the wisdom, it makes you away from this vicious cycle, and it interprets the perception of fixedness as a perception, but nothing more. So we have taken plenty of examples, and of course we talked about the question, we forgot that. So about our ability to make decisions, whether we are free of making decisions. And we discussed about dilemmas, about opposing wantings, and who makes these decisions, or how the decisions are made. Then we came to know that the decisions are made by the views, the wantings, the desires, aversions and delusions. Thereby, we are not free. The freedom is not met. The freedom can only be met by eradicating this wanting. How to eradicate wanting? By eradicating this ignorance. Actually, ignorance is the lack of wisdom. When you fulfill the wisdom, this cannot be found. So you will be away from the cycle. Okay, so with that, I think we can conclude today's session. So let us conclude today's session or the sermon by transferring the merits to everyone who is involved with this meritorious activity. So let us take a moment to transfer the merits that we all have acquired today by making offerings to the infinite virtues of the Noble Triple Gem, and by listening to Dhamma, by reflecting the Dhamma and contemplating them, and by making other meritorious deeds. First and foremost, let us remind ourselves how incredibly fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Lord Buddha's teachings. And with immense gratitude, let us transfer these merits to the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas, who since time immemorial have protected the sublime teachings of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations of the Noble Lineage in the form of Sripitaka, which is thankfully available to us to study, understand and comprehend the Dhamma. Let us also transfer these merits to all members of the Mahasangha all around the world, including the chief prelates of all of the chapters, who have dedicated their life towards the noble path and have committed their lives towards the betterment of all sentient beings. Let us not forget that among them are the monks and nuns resident in your local temples and nunneries, who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine. Let us also transfer these merits to our Guru Swamin Mahanse and all the other resident monks at our monastery, as well as the Anagarikas and Anagarikas attached to our monastery. Let us also transfer these merits and express our gratitude to all those who make great efforts to disseminate the teachings of the Buddha, be that by translating these sermons, in sharing them out with others, or inviting others to join them. Let us also transfer these merits to all of the devotees, the friends of the monastery, who for the sake of merits continue to sustain the Mahasangha. This includes everyone from those of you who have contributed to the construction of the monastery, who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, arms, robes, and medicine, and to all those who extend their well wishes. And let us also transfer these merits to our mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, sons and daughters, to our grandparents, uncles and aunts, cousins, nephews and nieces, to our friends and acquaintances, employees and employees, and to all those who have helped us, supported us, and assisted us in any way, shape, or form. By the power of these merits, may they be healed of any physical and mental ailments. May they overcome from their any spiritual obstacles to their spiritual progress. May the power of these merits, may they abstain from unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer these merits to all the gods and deities, primarily the Sakvadeva, and to all other numerous gods and deities who are committed to protect and fulfill the Sambuddha Sasana. Let us also transfer these merits to our guardian deities who always keep watchful eye over us and keep us out of harm's way. May through the power of all these merits, may they prosper in divine powers and wisdom. May they abstain from unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer these merits to our ancestors who have predeceased us, and reminding ourselves that those ancestors would have been our friends and family to us in this infinite long journey of samsara. Let us also transfer these merits to all the members of armed forces, including the police force, who sacrificed their lives to maintain the peace and harmony of our nation. May all those who lost their lives at war, be they friend or foe, rejoice in the merits that we have done today. Let us also transfer the merits who have lost their lives in natural calamities such as tsunamis, earthquakes, landslides, and pandemics, reminding ourselves that those who have been our families, friends, and acquaintances in this infinitely long journey of samsara, let us transfer these merits to them. May through the power and blessing of all the merits, if any one of them have been born in the woeful plains, may they redeem from the woeful plains and be born in the blissful plains. May they abstain from unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, let us all resolve that may through the power and blessing of all the merits that we have done today, let us witness the advent of many hundreds and thousands of Aryatanvanses. And finally, let us all resolve that may through the power and blessing of all the merits today, may you and I and everyone who have contributed to the success of this program be an Aryatanvanse or Aryat Meheninvanse in this very life itself and in this Supreme Buddha Sasana itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem be with you. Now you will get the blessing from the Mahasangha. So let's join our hands and get together and get the blessing from the Mahasangha. Ragaginnen midetva, dveshaginnen midetva, mohaginnen midetva, Nibbāna parama sukhayen Sukhita vetva. Nibbāna parama sukhayen Sukhita vetva. Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo Nibbāna parama sukhayen Sukhita vetva. Nibbāna parama sukhayen Sukhita vetva. Nibbāna parama sukhayen Sukhita vetva. Ragagini niveva, dveshagini niveva, mohagini niveva, සැප ලැබේවා නිවන් සැප ලැබේවා නිවන් සැප ලැබේවා තුනුරුවන්ගේ සූවිසි අනන්ත ගුණ බලෙන් සියලු ලෝක සියලු සත්වයෝම නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුගතිතර වෙත්වා සාදු සාදු සාදු